Welcome to Vintage McCoy. I'm Pastor Rick Brown, filling in for the famous Rob McCoy, who's on the road. And I have a wonderful guest, and we had so much fun in our last edition. We didn't even get to the topics that I really wanted to talk about, but here is Eric Metaxas. We're going to have a great time, aren't we, Eric?
You're not Rob McCoy. I was told I was doing a podcast with Rob. Rob and I are friends. Now, did Rob give you permission to do this?
He did.
All right.
He did. So as long as you'll stay and won't run off.
I'll stay.
All right.
I'll stay.
Stick around. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Kairos, this is your moment. Liberty is not man's idea, it's God's idea. We must participate in the public square. This is a moment in time that will define history as we know it, the furtherance of America as we know it.
That's a powerful gift, freedom. And we're not going to bow to tyranny.
This isn't me standing, it's us. This is the moment for the body of Christ.
We pray that there would be an awakening and a revival in the nation. In Jesus' name, amen.
Welcome back. Our time with Eric Metaxas is, I'm just having a lot of fun, Eric.
That's the goal.
Good.
Fun.
Fun.
It's the arbiter. For me, it's the arbiter. If I'm having fun, that's the goal. Yeah.
And you warned me, you're well-traveled and a little bit rummy, so this is you may say things that are scary. It's okay.
I had a lot of vodka right before I got here. I'm messed up, man. I'll say anything. No, I'm thrilled to be here. It's cool to be in California because I'm meeting all these heroic pastors. I mean, I know Rob McCoy, but I'm meeting others, James Cadiz and Greg Denham, and it's just really fun for me to get to meet my brothers on the other coast.
Such a blessing. Well, Eric has been a author for years.
Yeah.
And you also have the Eric Metaxas radio show on Salem.
Yes. People can find me on YouTube, on Rumble, and I say to everybody, I beg everybody, go to my website. It's my name, ericmetaxas.com. Everything is there. You can sign up for my newsletters where I send the videos out because some stuff's on Rumble, some's on YouTube. When I'm really controversial, I don't put it on YouTube. It's just don't tell anybody. But it's kind of cool to be able to do. It's really a TV program. TBN airs it as a TV program on the weekends, but I just put it out. Everything I do on the radio, I do as a video as well. Kind of like this, yeah.
Yeah. That's great. So we are going to talk, and you're spending the whole weekend with us, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, here at God Speak in Thousand Oaks, and we're excited about that. And you're going to be signing books for your new book, Fish Out of Water, which is the search for meaning of life. Basically, your story.
Yeah. Well, the title is Fish Out of Water: A Search for the Meaning of Life, and it is the story of my life up until Jesus punched a hole in the sheetrock and said, "Here I am," because I was lost. I was not some big sinner or whatever. I was just really lost. And around my 25th birthday, God came into my life just in a way that the only way to describe it is it was miraculous. It was a genuine miracle without which I don't know where I would be today. And so for years I've wanted to tell the story of coming to faith. But I said, in order to tell the story, I've told the story of my life up to that point because God spoke to me in a dream, which maybe some people have theological problems with because I'm not a Muslim. Only Muslims are allowed to get saved in dreams. Did you know that?
Not so.
Yeah,
not here.
Let's not get into that. But God spoke to me in a dream in 1988, and that's the culmination of this story because it was so, I mean, it really was genuinely miraculous. And I was one of these people, I was so intellectually gummed up because I went to Yale, where people think, oh, Yale. These places are so spiritually dark that we need to understand, like we're educating people away from the truth.
That's right.
And I was lost, and I was, I was a good person, a good kid. But I didn't know, does life have meaning? Much less, what is the meaning of life? Does life even have meaning? Is there a God? If there's a God, can we even know who that is? I was so intellectually gummed up, as I say, that I realized that God in His mercy spoke to me through a miracle, through a dream, and it was game over. I mean, it was so
Can you
miraculous.
That dream for
I will.
us
I will on the maybe on the other side or something because it's kind of complicated. But I said in order for the dream to make sense, I have to tell the story of my life because there are parts of my life that God wove in the dream so magnificently that it absolutely blew my mind. I mean, there was no doubt in my mind, Jesus is Lord, my life, my search is over. I found what I didn't even know you could find, which is love and truth and God. And so, but I wrote the book, I want to say this up front, I wrote the book as something that believers, Christians, can give to non-believers. In other words, there are a lot of good people like me, who I was back then, just lost, they don't know what they think. And if you give them a really Christian book, they might be polite and say, oh, thank you very much, but they're thinking, well, this is not for me. This is not who I am. I wanted to write a book for those people so that you can give it to somebody and say, look, it's funny. I mean, a lot of it is flat out hilarious stories, true stories that are just, you won't even believe them, and I'm telling you, there's not a syllable of exaggeration. These are all true, crazy stuff. And I said, I want to write this, and I want it to be entertaining and a good read and hopefully well written. I pride myself as a literary writer. I wanted this to be a work of art, but that tells these stories, and only at the very end, once the reader has kind of bought into this whole thing, do I tell the ending, which is the Jesus thing. So if you give the book to somebody who likes to read but is not on the page that we are theologically, don't tell them the punchline. Just give it to them and see what they think, because this is an honest search. I was just lost, floating along. I wasn't looking for Jesus. I wasn't looking for God. I didn't even know, is that real? You know, people are asking the question, is it real? If they knew Jesus was Lord, they wouldn't really be looking for him. They would have found him, you know. It's people that they don't know what to think. They're getting a lot of mixed messages. I was one of those people, and so I have a lot of compassion for folks that don't get it. And so I wrote this book in many ways for those people. Now, I think anybody will enjoy it, and I know that the greatest compliment you get as a writer is people say that I cried or I laughed so hard that I cried. That, to me, is the greatest thing that I could ever hear. And I've gotten a lot of that from this book, and I didn't know what I had until, you know, you get it out there. But that makes me real happy that people, like I'm getting emails from people that my family is dying with embarrassment because I'm on the beach howling with laughter and everybody's looking at me because I'm reading your book. I'm thinking, thank you. Like that makes me feel great about the book. Because listen, laughing is a beautiful thing, and I really think that it's healthy for us to laugh. And I tell stories on myself. Like, you just look back at what an idiot you were. You're so young that you get in these situations and stuff. So it's all in the book. A lot of embarrassing stuff. Yeah, very embarrassing. Some of it is very embarrassing. Yeah.
So your background is you are the son of immigrant parents.
Yeah, my dad, the cover of the book is my dad. It's picture my dad at the Statue of Liberty in 1958. It was taken by my mother. They were on a date at the Statue of Liberty in 1958. So my mom took the picture, and it really sums up my story because my father came from Greece. My mother came from Germany. They left, you know, war-torn Europe for America. And they met in an English class in New York City. And they got married. Now, Greeks never marry non-Greeks. It's like, it's never done. So it was like a big thing. And if you're raised by a Greek and a German, that means you will be raised Greek. And so we went to the Greek Orthodox Church. And, you know, the Greek ethnicity is Greeks are so full of pride about being Greek that it's almost funny. And I mean, there are a lot of jokes in the book where I talk about that kind of stuff. But so I grew up in this Greek immigrant world, the Greek church, and again, a lot of that is really funny. Like, there's just no doubt about it that it was just insane stuff that I lived through, funny stuff, crazy stuff. We moved to Connecticut when I was 9, and so that for me was like entering America for the first time.
From Queens?
From Queens, New York to Connecticut. So for the first time, it's like touch football, kickball, baseball, bike riding, building tree forts, like the whole American thing that was new to me. So that's a part of the book. And I did a lot of fishing growing up. That was my thing, fly fishing and bass fishing and whatever. And it was just beautiful. And then, you know, the dream of the American working class, immigrant, whatever, I got to go to Yale University. Little did I know that the values that my parents gave me to love America, you know, to respect God, even though we weren't like evangelicals, but all of that, you go to a place like Yale and you're like, okay, so here I am, working class, you know, I don't know anything. Tell me what's the meaning of life? What's the story? And turns out that they don't, they didn't have the same heartland values that my mom and dad taught me, but I drank that Kool-Aid. And by the time I graduated, I was pretty lost. I always say that, part of what Yale and those kinds of places do is that they've already figured out that here's the secret. You want to know the meaning of life? The meaning of life is that there is no meaning. We evolved out of the primordial soup by chance. Like, you have no more value than a centipede, but we don't want to talk about that because it's depressing. So here's what we're going to do. We'll just, we'll have a few laughs and get a great job and work really hard and just don't think about the bleakness of a world without God. Don't think about it, So I was an English major. I wanted to be a writer. Therefore, we already know I did not get a good job. I tried to be a writer. I floated. I drifted, whatever. If you float and drift out of college, by definition, you know what will happen. You will move back in with your parents. So I ended up back with my parents. They're looking at me like, we didn't get to go to college. We worked menial jobs, so you get to go to Yale. Why are you here? What's going on? And I always joke around that, like, the friends of my the friends of my, that I went to college with, like, their parents would be like, oh, Eric's finding himself, But my parents would be like, Eric should find himself a job and get out of here because this is, it was like a hard, I can laugh now, but it's the ending of the book, and it was really a dark time for me. I was really, really struggling. It was an awful time. And I got this horrible menial job, and it was just awful. But in the midst of this hell, God appointed somebody to start sharing his faith with me. And
at work?
At work.
Oh, wow.
And this horrible job. But he's sharing his faith with me. And this went on for months because I was kind of like, don't get near me with that weird Christian stuff, that kind of whatever. But at the same time, I was in enough pain that I was like, tell me a little bit more, tell me a little bit more. So this went on, this cat and mouse game went on for months. And then at the culmination of it, God came and spoke to me in this dream. And it was sufficiently miraculous that I have never looked back. I mean, if you have a real miracle, it's really hard to say, well, I don't know if that happened, or I don't know. I mean, like, it happened. It happened. It changed my life. I went from being like, I don't know about this stuff, to diving in and starting to read the Bible.
You never look back, do you, Eric?
Well, I hope you don't look back, and I thank God that I haven't looked back. And from that moment on, I knew, and I'm going to write about this in the sequel to this book, because what happened after that, I really did experience miracle after miracle where God proved himself to me over and over in genuinely miraculous ways. It wasn't all miracles, but I experienced a number of real miracles. And I thought, people need to know God is alive today, and he wants to speak to us, and this is who he is, and he does that to underscore his character and his life in our lives, so that we think this isn't just some philosophy I bought into. He's real. He's alive. And so, when that happened, when I had this miracle, I just was like, okay, Lord, what do you want to do with my life? I give myself to you totally. And he led me to write, I wrote 30 children's books. I worked for VeggieTales. I worked for Chuck Colson. I did one of the voices on one of the VeggieTales. And I, God just opened these doors, and then eventually led me to write what we talked about last time, the biography about William Wilberforce, which opened the door to a biography of Bonhoeffer, which changed my life. Yeah.
And I had a very radical conversion in my life, a very, by myself, the Lord filled his presence.
How old were you?
I was 19.
Whoa.
And I was half drunk. I had put a couple of drug deals together that morning, and actually woke up in a home that morning that I had to go out and find a street sign to know even where I was. And on a Sunday afternoon in February of 1984, I went home and I was pacing through the house. And for months, I didn't know what was going on with me, but it was the Holy Spirit coming after me. But I was so miserable and under conviction for months. And so as I'm pacing back and forth in the house, I had honestly never remembered praying in my entire life at the age of 19. I bowed my head. My grandparents were Christians on both sides of the family. When they blessed the food, I bowed my head out of respect. But I personally had never prayed to God. And the Lord spoke to me in a still small voice and said, why don't you pray? It was so powerful, I laughed out loud. I'm all by myself. I laughed out loud and went, pray. Wow. It's like I'm talking to myself. And as I said those words, pray, the presence of God filled the room. I fell to my knees and began to sob and confess my sin and ask Jesus into my life.
This is real.
And
this is real.
It's so when you have those experiences, like the dream or the supernatural aspect of a divine God that loves humanity, and He intervenes. There's no mistake.
It's too much to bear. I mean, it's and not everybody experiences these things, but it doesn't matter. God is He's the same, but He speaks to everyone differently. So anytime anybody says, you know, well, I want this, or it should happen this way or this way. I didn't have like a burden of sin, and I mean, everybody comes in a different way.
That's right.
And you can't make a pattern or a formula. The point is, God is God. Jesus is Lord, and He loves us individually and speaks to us individually, and He knows when to reach us. I mean, the fact that He reached you then,
at that moment,
He knew, you know, and there's no, it's the reason we're on the planet, right?
That's right.
It's why we're here. Yeah. And I don't even want to think about what would have happened if I didn't have this experience. But as I say, I wrote the book Fish Out of Water because I want to reach people who would say, oh, I don't know if that's for me, or that's a little this, or it's a little that.
Yeah.
And I was that person. I was that person. I remember just thinking, don't get near me with that weird stuff.
Well, thank you for leading the way, because that was my heart. I've written my biography, about 100,000 words, up to the point of salvation, in a radical, because I was raised by this crazy ex-convict that just got out of San Quentin from armed robbery and prison escape when my mom married him, and I wanted it to be the same. I want to lead people in this incredible journey without a lot of preachy Christianese.
That's the key.
And I want to lead them to the foot of the cross and to fall in love with Jesus at the end of it. So thanks for leading the way on that. That's awesome.
When's that book coming out?
I don't know. I haven't written. I just paused after salvation. I'm not sure what to do. So you're the guy I need advice.
Well, we'll talk about that privately. But honestly, that's wonderful. People need those stories. It's wonderful.
So let's back up a little bit and unpack a little bit of you've got a Greek father, you've got a German mother. Was there any language barriers for them?
Yes. That's why the book is called Fish Out of Water, because wherever I went, I felt like I didn't quite fit in. Because, you know, in the Greek community, in the Greek church, whatever, I was never Greek enough. Because my mother's German, and at home, we didn't speak Greek. All the other kids spoke Greek at home. We spoke English, because my mother couldn't speak Greek, my father couldn't speak German, so we spoke English, right? So I knew some Greek, I knew some German, you know, my grandmother and my aunt, whatever. The German stuff was there, the Greek stuff was everywhere, but I never quite fit in. And then when we moved to Connecticut, where I'm around all these all-Americans like you, people look at you like, you know, you're this ethnic, you know, you're from the city, you know. And so again, I'm a fish out of water. And then I go to Yale, and I'm a fish out of water. I'm the working class kid who's, you know, suddenly among these cultural elites that, you know, grew up in Park Avenue and stuff. And so I always felt like a fish out of water. And at the end of the book, the dream that where Jesus speaks to me, he reveals himself as the fish out of water. He's the one that leaves the water, that leaves heaven to come to where we are to die.
Oh, that's great.
And it makes sense on so many levels, but you realize that he says, I will become a fish out of water so that you will never be a fish out of water again. And he brings us back with him to heaven where we belong, which is, you know, we become the fish in water, where we were meant to be all along, but only through Christ coming here where he doesn't belong to die. I mean, it's this amazing thing. But so God spoke to me in this kind of symbolic dream, but it was crystal clear because of my upbringing. You know what it meant. And I don't know. Maybe in the next show I can give you the details because it's a little complicated. But it was so miraculous. I said, I've got to tell this story because there are people that they're not on the same page, but they're going to read it and they're going to say, okay, I've been following this guy from birth to this point. He's not making this up. He's not lying. Wow, you know, this is interesting. And I can't take credit. This is God. This is not me, like I figured it out. I figured out nothing.
Are your mom and dad still alive?
My mom and dad are still alive. I spoke to them last night, and
And is
they're...
this book at all troubling for them?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. No, my
This
father...
is my concern. This is my concern
My father
with my book.
is hilarious. My father is 93, and he was saying to me, now he's on the cover of the book, right? And I was calling my parents constantly, asking them questions, like trying to remember little details and because I'm very exacting. If you read my biographies of Luther, Bonhoeffer, and Wilberforce, I'm extremely exacting. I want to get everything exactly right, the dates and the places and whatever. And I always would find stuff in other biographies like, they got that wrong. I got to correct that. So in writing my book, I was asking my parents all these little questions, and my father would say, like, "You're not writing about that, are you? Or you're not writing about that, are you?"
I've had the same experience with my parents. I'm calling them to try to get this, and then they have different stories. I'm like, no, what?
Yeah,
no.
right? You're trying to get it figured out, right?
You know, you guys gonna be mad at me when I write this
Yeah,
book?
yeah. Well, my attitude to my parents, first thing is, tough luck. I'm writing this book for a lot of people that need to hear this stuff.
Get over it.
That's number one. Number two, you both come out smelling like roses, so you're insane if you've got a problem with what I wrote in this book. And I told my father, he's so funny. He's like, he's 93.
Yeah.
So like, Dad, what are you worried about? Like your reputation? You're gonna like lose work, or what are you worried about? And he's funny that way, right? And I said, Dad, let me break it down. You come out as the hero of this book. Like this book is a love letter to you about growing up and the love that my mom and dad, they were not evangelicals, but the love I got from them was God's love. They didn't know it maybe, but love is love. And they loved me and whatever. So I said to my father, this book, you're going to be the hero of this book. I mean, you're going to be famous because people want to meet the guy. There's some very funny stories about my dad in the book. Like I consider them hilarious. I said, I've been telling all these stories my whole life. I've got to put them in a book. But yeah, my parents were definitely like, it must be kind of weird to be in a book, right? Yeah. But, that's tough luck, man.
So, at your conversion, this also is a very shocking time for our folks. We get saved. And radically saved.
In my case, it was.
So I want to hear that. The response of we send our son off to Yale.
Yeah.
He's lost and floundered around, and now he loves Jesus.
Now he's become a Jesus freak.
What do we do
What do we do? Well, can you imagine?
And what year was this?
This was 88.
88. Okay.
We're like the same age. I think you're younger than me. But I got to tell you, imagine this. My father took me to church every Sunday, Greek Orthodox church. I never heard the gospel.
Right.
I never, even though the people in the Greek community are the sweetest people in my life, they're my friends to this day. But I wasn't raised like we read the Bible, where, it was more like we're Greek. Like we're Greek, we're baptized, we're not Turks, we're not atheists, we're Greeks. Great. But then you go to a place like Yale and you're like, well, do I believe Jesus rose from the dead? Really? I don't know. Do I believe sex is just for marriage? Like, I don't know what I believe. That's when you realize I didn't get the download, right? Yep. So when I have this experience at age 25, and I stupidly, as young people often do, I said to my father, like, I'm a Christian now, and he's like, okay, so what were we doing like every Sunday when I drag you to church and you don't want to go? Like, what was taken to a mosque, to a Buddhist temple? What was that? You weren't a Christian then, And it is a little complicated, right? Because
and they feel a sense of failure. Like,
right.
What are you saying that you know Jesus more? I've taken you to church your whole life.
Right. Well, the good news is this is all 33 years ago now. So in the last 10 years, for sure, my parents have. It's been longer than that, but I think over time they saw my life, and so the 25-year-old hothead, turns into the 35-year-old less hot-headed. And the time passes and they just see like, oh, I get it now. It's a good thing. But I think I also had to frame it for them so that they could not be offended. I had to say, like, look, I was not prepared for the secular world of Yale. It's not that you failed me or that the church failed me. It's just that if you'd known what I was going into, you'd realize you're putting me, I'm a sheep among wolves. This is not, and I think there are a lot of kids, they think they're growing up in the church, but the fact is they're not prepared for what they're headed for. So that's really was my story. But both my parents, they may not be quite where I am, but it seems obvious to me that they get it and that they didn't back then. But there are a lot of people that go to church and they don't get it.
Do you have siblings?
I don't have any siblings, but I have one brother. That was a joke. He's a sibling. But I call him my brother. I don't say he's my sibling. But my brother, yeah, my
You don't
brother.
like sibling, the word.
Yeah, it's just a funny word. But my brother is in Connecticut. He's a year and a half younger than I am, and it's a strange thing when you have this powerful conversion experience, because there are people that believe, but they don't believe the way you do. They're kind of like, well, you really took this hook, line, and sinker. You've become a little bit of a fanatic. Can you talk about something else?
Yeah, normal Christianity that you read in the New Testament is considered fanatical, radical.
Yeah.
But it's just, you read the New Testament, this is just normal Christianity.
That's the problem. That's called Christianity. So, a lot of people think that they can live as functioning atheists, but they say, well, I'm a Christian, I sort of believe. Well, the devil also believes in God, so you're not really the head of anybody there. You have to give your life to him, and you have to say, come into my life and lead me for your purposes. That's why I'm here. And if you don't know that, you're missing the point of why you're here. Who wants to miss that? That's why I call the book Fish Out of Water, A Search for the Meaning of Life. Does anybody want to miss the meaning of their life? No. Like, this is really important.
Yeah. So, Eric, I think as we wrap up this segment, I think you're in a great spot to bring a word of encouragement to parents, because parents raise their kids sometimes in, nominal Christianity, like a Greek Orthodox or Catholicism, or something that their orthodoxy would say, hey, Jesus died on the cross for your sins, was buried, rose from the dead.
Theoretically they believe in all that, but they're just
experientially they don't.
They're not bringing it home in a way that it's going to be life-changing.
Yeah.
And if it's not life-changing, do you really believe it?
So we raise our kids, and we're so proud of our kids. They go to a nice college, they get a bachelor's degree, they get a master's degree, they get a PhD, they go to a renowned school, Yale and Harvard. I mean, they're the pinnacle of American academia.
Yeah.
And yet, share just briefly as a word of encouragement for parents about what they're going to go dismantle their faith in academia.
I will just tell you, people say things to me like, oh, your daughter's really smart. Oh, your daughter's really pretty. And I think, you know what? I couldn't care less about my daughter's IQ, about whether she's attractive or not, about whether she went to this college or that college. All of that stuff is less than meaningless. It is nothing. If you give your life to God, that means something.
It does.
You could be unattractive, you could be not at all smart. Who cares? Those things are totally besides the point. Whether you give your life to Jesus and know him and want to walk with him, it's the only thing that matters. So when I see Christian parents thinking, my son got into this college and that college, I just think yeah. First of all, it's worth nothing. Second of all, it may lead him away from God. Is there anything worse than that? Is there anything worse than that? Not in my book.
That's right.
That's the worst thing. I wouldn't care if my son or daughter goes to college or any of that stuff. That's just totally worldly garbage. Yeah. And as somebody who had the best of the worldly garbage, I can tell you, a place like Yale University is designed to make you a maniacal, Marxist, woke, nut.
That's right.
And
that's what we're seeing.
That is just, it's kind of funny because that's the story of Wilberforce. In my Wilberforce book, I tell the story that he had a conversion early on when he was 11, 12 years old, and his mother and grandfather were horrified that their son became one of these, in those days it was an enthusiast, a Methodist, a born-again Jesus freak. Right. So they dragged him away from that and didn't even let him go to their dead church on weekends because they thought, this is a nightmare. We want our son to be a sophisticated, we want him to go to Cambridge and blah, blah, blah. And that's exactly what happened to him. He became all that stuff and lost God. And God grabbed him around age 26. But all the stuff that the world values is absolute garbage. And I know that. If I ever had money, I would never give money to Yale. These places are, I just can't imagine. I just want to say that there's so many people, Christians included, who put value in this stuff. Folks, you have no idea. It is really not. The values that the world has, I can speak from experience, they are genuinely bad. It's not just it's not what it could be. The only good thing about Yale is it gives me a credential that I can use for God. and it gives me an ability maybe to reach people who say, well, that's interesting. He went to Yale, so maybe he has something to say or whatever. And, you know, and I learned to speak the language of that people group, in a sense, which is like the blue state, sophisticated, New York, whatever. I speak that language. I know that world enough to be able to speak to people who are, and a lot of this book is like that. I mean, if you give this book to somebody who's like, you know, a blue state liberal, I'm speaking their language. That's who I am, you know. But I found God and I found His values, and so it's kind of like a missionary thing that you know how to speak that language and how to communicate that way for God's purposes.
Yeah. It's cross-cultural ministry.
That is what it is. Yeah.
And that's the same, you know, raising my kids. That's all I was passionate about, is them knowing Jesus. And I would jokingly tell my son, I don't care what you do, even if you're a garbage man, you're picking up garbage and dumping it in, you make a good living, you're content, you're happy. If you love Jesus, that's all that. Everything else is icing on the cake.
But I mean,
me.
that is a fact. People need to understand that is a fact.
Yeah, people don't really believe it.
There's no doubt about that.
They don't.
Well,
really,
if you don't believe it, then you're missing it, because that is totally true. Listen, there are people in China right now who are being horrifyingly persecuted for their faith in Jesus, and they're willing to be persecuted because they know He is life.
He's worth it.
He is not making your life better. He is life.
Yes.
That is true.
Yeah.
And if you know that, it'll get you through anything.
That's right. And Paul said, I count all these things as rubbish.
That's right.
For the excellency of the knowledge of
and
Christ.
that's what I was thinking of when I mentioned Yale and all this stuff. Like, trust me, New York Times bestseller. Who cares? The New York Times has become like a Marxist tabloid.
Who wants their endorsement?
Well, I really don't at this point. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great place to stop here, and then we'll launch into our next segment. What do you think?
I love it.
Hey, God bless you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Here with Eric Metaxas. Looking forward to another edition. So load us up tomorrow.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. For more information, head over to vintagemccoy.com or follow us on Instagram @TheVintageMcCoy. We'll see you there.